Airwindows, and this is the DubPlate version of this CD that never existed, because this is Airwindows DubPlate. But doesn't look like much, does it? But there's a lot going on here. For instance, let's go and fire up, say, Alien Kittens, and we're used to hearing it like this. But what would happen if we made a dubplate out of this? We'd get something like this. And you probably wouldn't get a bunch of controls, because back in the day when dubplates were really a going concern, they ran too fast to fiddle around with stuff like crazy for every little music maker coming along. And that's part of the secret of the dubplate. That's part of what's going on there. So what is Airwindows dubplate? It's really kind of a whole bunch of things. It starts with some of the things that you can get in mastering, because I've put out, of course, Airwindows mastering, and it has a lot of stuff going on. But more so, and doing certain things that mastering didn't or couldn't do. Keep an eye out for a new version coming up, though. So what's the deal with the dubplate? Well, if you're making music and cutting it to vinyl, there are certain things that you can do and certain things that you shouldn't do. For instance, you don't want to put a lot of low-frequency information in the side channel. On a dubplate, your low-frequency information in the main channel is going to go parallel to the surface of the record. That's how they're laid out. But if you had side channel content and it was low-frequency information, big old swings, that would go vertically, and it can make the stylus jump off of the groove. So dubplates, particularly when we're talking about a real automated process where just lots of amateur recordings are pouring right through, they need to have a chain that's going to control things so that they don't have to spend a lot of time fixing up problems. And that's the key to the dubplate sound. Now this is a emulation as close as I could get it using Airwindows techniques, so we're not like emulating specific pieces of gear or anything here. We're trying to get the same behavior as measured in Airwindows meter. This is for reining in the low frequencies on the side channel real aggressively. It also goes and reins in the subsonics, also rather aggressively. And you can't throw super high frequencies onto a record cutting lathe, or they can burn out the head. That's bad. We don't want to burn out the head. But anybody making electronic music and coming through going, cut my track. Here, I have a CD. This is the track that you need to cut to a disc. What's the snare? Oh, I took full range white noise, and then I high-pass filtered it so it was pink noise, and it's distorted by cranking it up 18 dB. That's my snare. Dubplate houses had to deal with stuff like that coming in. So if you have something relatively normal, like for instance these drums, we can turn dubplate on. That doesn't sound all that different. It sounds more or less the same. There's a little less in the low frequencies of the kick drum. It's noticeable, but it's not changing things around wildly. However, supposing you're coming through and you're going, oh, I have a kick drum and the kick drum is super loud because I wanted my track to push 20 hertz through the subwoofers of the Well, the dubplate house might not be able to take that and give you a competitively loud vinyl record out of it. So you could start with something like this. This piece of music is called That Sucked because it did not become something that you could actually have. It was abandoned, but this was what it was. And it does suck. But among the things you can hear are really bright hi-hats and a kind of thumping subsonic low frequency thing going on. And let's suppose we want to take that and make it act like it was cut to a dub plate, because the person who was making that thought it was going to be the greatest thing ever and paid money and had it cut to a dub plate, and what you'd get would be more like this. So it's like the same thing, kinda, but everything sits a little farther back. The low frequencies have a little more dynamics to them, and an interesting side effect is that that is actually peaking higher than the original track was. I adjusted it to be able to work with, but running it through, I am running my shifting of bits gain there for that particular track. And what's happening is if I don't engage dubplate, we've got the unreasonably low bass, we've got various stuff, which is in fact, well, hang on a second. Here, I had not engaged the shifting of bit gain. So with this weird track, which is also cut kind of loud, this one's kind of clipping the extremes a little bit. It's just a disaster from A to Z. But if we run that through our shifting of bits gain, it starts with bit shift, and those are words I can't say on YouTube for fear that they'll think I'm swearing. You get this naturally, but then if we turn on DubPlate, those peaks are going to actually end up a little bit higher. And the mid-range is a lot more aggressive. The side channel is gone, just it's filtered very aggressively. And the interesting thing about all that is the way those filters are working. In order to make it, what I had to work with was somebody who fulfilled me a digital version of their track and also a capture of the dubplate that they had made. Now, they weren't using the big name booked like 24/7 dubplate maker in the UK in the heyday of that happening. They used a second string one, but it was still doing the same basic thing. And that means that there could be a dubplate too if somebody can come up with really good source material for me. But what this did is I recorded the real version, like recorded off of a vinyl record that was in fact a dubplate. And I had the source, although the source wasn't actually the digital information that was given to the dubplate house. I was given a mastered digital version like off a CD, so all of my peaks were clipped there. But it was possible to work out what was basically going on there regardless. And one of the things that was happening was the actual dubplate had considerably more aggressive peaks than the digital one, even though the lows were not as extended. Everything had a little more space to it, and that's what the DubPlate plugin is there to do. And again, you can set it up so that you won't actually notice a difference on some sounds. Here's like a guitar sound with DubPlate bypassed. And then we'll turn it on. you'd hardly notice because that's a mid-rangey sound. The deal with dubplate, and the reason it's such an interesting thing to give people, is this is your being rescued from being a terrible mixer plugin. If you like throwing your bass around or whatever, and so you're throwing a whole bunch of crazy subsonics that are not going to translate into a big club or anything like that, and you have a sweet tooth for supersonic high frequencies, and so you're just making everything far too bright, dubplate can fix that for you. And what it will do is, for instance, here's with our Alien Kittens track again. It'll restrain everything just by turning it on like this. And you might feel, oh no, that took away too much bass. I made sure that my 20 hertz throbbing kick drum was the loudest thing on the track. Well, that's not going to translate to a record. You're not going to be able to play that in a club because everything else is going to be too quiet. So dubplate fixes that, but through a process of nonlinearity that is allowing some hints of that super low stuff to come through anyway. And I had to do that in order to reproduce what was happening on the real dubplate. Because you did the real dubplate, and it didn't just only sound as if there was a high-pass filter on there, or on the side channel for that matter. It sounded bigger, it sounded more ambitious, and the dynamic range, as I studied it in meter and made sure that I knew what was going on, way higher than the original digital source. Granted, it was the original digital source that had been mastered, but there was just way more space, and this plugin gives you that. It's able to manufacture what didn't exist in the original track, to the extent that what I can do is take the CD that I made back in the day. These do exist, they're out there. This is an unopened version. I've got a few more of these. I could conceivably sell them, but what I'm going to do is run the entire thing simply through DubPlate and pad it enough going in that the output coming out is not going to be clipped. And what you were listening to is because I've already done this. This exists now. And it is the DubPlate version, as if I had access to that back in the day, of this entire album, where this is a track called Rain Dragon, and I went and did the entire thing. Here. The original master. And this is what you get. And back in the day, I remixed this CD so many times. I could not get it to sound or act right. It was never quite right. One pass of dubplate, while padding it down enough to make the output not click, because again, this is slightly laudinated, so I didn't have the full range of dynamics that I might have liked. And you got that out of it. And I had to pad it over 3 dB to make space for the peaks that came out once I'd done it up properly. Every single track got better. Every single one. And that's going to be available for download as an album on Bandcamp, which I'm putting out before I finish remixing all of my current stuff, because I'm getting stuck in that sort of thing again. I want to make the stuff from 2021, 2022, and so on be ready. But hey, starting with this and doing the DubPlate version of it, it was immediately everything that I wanted it to be. It just works. I can go upstairs and listen to how it sounds over the big system, and it still basically just works. So that's going to be available on Bandcamp, and that is the work of Airwindows DubPlate. So if you feel like that produced a weird synthetic techno album that sounds like it's coming off of a retro dubplate and is actually pleasing to the ear and works nicely for you, well, the album might be for sale in Bandcamp at the normal price, but the plugin's free, because my plugins are always free. So if you feel like you could be stuck trying to remix an album for years on end and it's never okay, because you're stuck with, like, what I had when doing this was, let's see, a Yamaha FB01 and a Kawai G Mega little synthesizer box. That's the Rompler. Pretty sure I had the Proteus one. I think all the drums are a Alesis D4. Like, this is an older album. And when I got to the final mix and put out the CD, which this is literally a real CD, this barcode is real. It's not fake. That's the real deal. All of that was done back when I was sequencing the music that you're hearing in MIDI on a Mac Performa 575. And that was playing all the MIDI, running all those synthesizers, which I was then capturing to 2-track, probably 16-bit, because you couldn't do any better than that. I think it might be had gotten to 24-bit at that time. I'm not entirely sure, but that's all I had. You couldn't do a DAW back then. And it's all like early synthesizers and drum machines and things that are programmed to do that kind of stuff. So it's literally the kinds of sounds that people were making dubplates out of. And now it has the virtual dubplate that it never found in its real life. So if you're going to work with Airwindows DubPlate because you happen to have a bunch of sounds, whether they're retro synthesizers or whether you're just working entirely in the box and all of your sounds are stuck in that zone of not sounding rewarding and you're struggling to get it to sound like music, what you do is try maybe mixing into DubPlate, and it will stop you from doing anything that's unreasonable. And it will control and suppress everything. And then if you really want to do the DubPlate thing, mix into DubPlate and have no kinds of loudination whatsoever. Do not put on clipping. Do not put on limiting. Just make the sounds and push them into DubPlate so that it doesn't entirely peak, and go with that. And you should get something that sounds real big and sounds real like dubplatey and retro and stuff, because one thing about this plugin is that it makes the mid-range really jump out and communicate. Reverbs will sit back because the restrictions of the high frequencies will cause them to sit more back. Aggressive sounds that have too much edge on them will be restrained. So if you've got a bunch of nasty sounding guitars or synths or whatever, you recorded with a bad microphone, or you just don't know how to make, like the FB01 stuff that I did on this album, that's an FM synth. I was programming my own sounds in the FM synth and trying to get stuff that was really neat. And I had taken apart the Yamaha FB01, which is a little box about yay big, and wired the output through so that I patched directly into the output of the synthesizer chip, bypassing a perfectly good op amp that was already there, in the belief that that was going to make it sound better. What it made it sound was brighter, and that's not necessarily your friend for trying to mix the resulting album. But DubPlate completely and immediately fixed that. So if you don't know what you're doing, maybe this is going to be some help to you. If you do know what you're doing, you'll probably be able to use Airwindows mastering, because what you're doing is going to be already closer to what you'd want. But if you need it to be forced into something that sounds more listenable, maybe dubplate's the thing that you're going to want. At least I hope so. I hope there are people who are trying to get stuff that they enjoy, and they just have a craving for that sort of old school vibe that they maybe have on mixtapes, or they've heard people doing DJ sets, or they've been out in clubs maybe listening to people playing a bunch of electronic or techno music off of turntables, and when this is the coolest thing ever, I want this, why does my stuff not sound like this? Well, now it can. I'm going to get on to, well, firstly editing this video, and then putting out the album on Bandcamp so people can have it, and I will link to that album, but I'm also going to be linking to the plugin, because the album is the normal default Bandcamp price, but the plugin is free and open source, and you can have it for nothing and use it on your own stuff. Talk to you later. Bye-bye.